All right, so just for the recording purposes, I'll restate that. Yeah, we are going to be using Studio Binder for our scheduling software in budgeting in this class. Though to get across the basics of the conceptual stuff that would be used across the board, and also to introduce you to something that is the industry standard, even though we will not be using it this semester, I'm going to do this next tutorial in Movie Magic, which again, if you ever decided you wanted to become an assistant director for scheduling or a production manager for budgeting, you would end up working in this software. The good news is pretty much everything across the board uses the same concepts. So it's like really like the difference between like, do you edit in Avid or Premiere? It's like the concepts don't change. It's just the specific buttons might. But we will do also a tutorial in Studio Binder proper when we actually start entering things on it. But again, this is just more about the conceptual stuff and also to introduce you to the industry standard software. So I'm going to share my screen. We'll go to desktop 2, go blank. Is that big white weird chart-y thing coming up? Awesome. So this, so I'm in, this is Movie Magic scheduling. This is like the landing page if you open up a new schedule. This is a brand new schedule. And right now you're not actually looking at the scheduling part. What you're looking at is a scene entry page. The scene entry page is where you put the data for each individual scene. You know, I had you break down your scripts by scene and their scene number and all that fun stuff. So every single scene that you've broken down will have an individual page like this. And, you know, you can even see things you recognize here. I look over here, that probably looks familiar, right? There's your little categories. For example, there's your 1/8 of a pages and stuff, you know? And so basically like whatever it is, I would just, the first step is just entering every scene you have. This is why I was saying you can get away with probably only having like the first 40 scenes on our first day if you had to, because there's no way you'll get more than 40 in a day. And we mostly do this together. Basically, my thing is I even though when we were in person, Movie Magic was so cost prohibitive that you had to use it in the lab. And because of that, I built into this class schedule the fact that we would do it in class together. And that way you didn't have to have it as homework, because the only way you could do it is that you'd have to go into the lab. Obviously, it's different because you have Studio Binder at home, but I don't want to punish you for that. So I have not restructured the class. I've purposely still given several class periods to do this. The only thing is, you know, whatever the designated amount of class periods we give this will probably be 2 to 3 for the entry of stuff. And then after that, it's all fun stuff. But if for some reason, if let's say I give the 3 class periods to work on it and you don't finish, anything you don't finish then would be homework. But I will give you adequate time that most of you guys should be able to get it all in by then. This is kind of tedious part before the fun part. But I'm going to show you how it basically works and kind of just explain what the deal is in the process. Again, this is not going to be the same interface, but it's going to be very similar. So let's, you know, I'm just going to make up a scene as I go. So I'm going to say I'm going to put it in chronological order. First of all, you'll see something here. If you are using Movie Magic, and it's good to know this for the future, like this thing, right? This little first field that says sheet, that is literally its own internal tracking. It does not need to correspond to anything, and it cannot change. So if you forget a scene and have to add it later and it throws off the continuity between the scene number and the sheet number, doesn't matter. It's completely irrelevant. So, you know, I could put scene 5 on sheet 1 and it wouldn't make a difference. So I would call my first scene 1. And, you know, if I ended up putting a scene before it, I could do A1, whatever it is. You can put the letter or the number combo here. And if you notice, if I go down to the drop-down menu here, I only have those 3 choices: interior, exterior, or what I would call I/E, or interior/exterior. Well, let's just say it's an exterior. I'll make this an establishing thing. And the set here is basically the log line. This is where you put, you know, interior, you know, like exterior Bob's house day. So this one would be Bob's house. And since it's an exterior, we don't need to get any more granular than that, because obviously we're not just exterior of the living room. And if you wanted to be super specific, depends again. I mean, you don't need to go this far, but you could say front patio Bob's house or front of the house, but you really don't need to do that. I'm going to say Bob's house. And then if I go here, you notice I have my 4 choices that I told you that you could use: day, night, morning, or evening. Let's say it's morning. This is a very, very by the books movie, Bob's House, the movie, that starts with his morning and is going to run through a day of his life. Now, this scene is basically an establishing shot. So it's going to be only 1/8 of a page. This scene is 0 pages and 1/8 of a page there. So 0 full pages and 1/8 is the remainder. And the synopsis is establishing, establishing, our intro, establishing Bob's house. Whatever you want to, again, this is the Hulk speak thing. And now this you can do on the day. You didn't have to, I told you this is something that is one of the optional things you could do in advance, as long as you remember what the scene's about. And again, it doesn't have to be like any poetry at all. It should be like just like a sentence fragment, just something. So, because like we're going to assume that a lot of your locations you're going to be at more than once. And because of that, and remember, the whole thing with this software is it's a feature and not a bug, that we are going to disassociate all the scenes from each other and take them out of their chronology. And because that, you want to make sure it's very clear which scene we're talking about that may be outside of Bob's house, out of like a pile of them maybe. So you just give just basically an overview of the most important point of the scene, the thing that's going to differentiate it from any other scene. And it can be like, Bob comes home from work after getting fired or something, whatever it is, so I just put, this is the first, I say intro because it's basically the first time we see the exterior of Bob's house. And this is going to be a script page. Now here, since I'm using the 1/8 of a page up here to track how long a scene is, I don't have to do anything crazy like put a range. But here I usually put the page that the scene starts on. Some people will put the full range, like it goes from page 2 to page 4. I'm not going to do that because I already know it's only going to be a fraction of a page. So I'm going to say it's script page 1, is scene 1. And script day, well, since it's the very first scene of the movie, it has to be 1D or D1, sorry. Remember, this is where that movie day is, or the thing we talked about. So we know it's day. Now remember, when it comes to the script day, there are no morning and evening. It's either day or night only. And it's D1, or whichever shows up, you skip over anything. If I have no night on day 1, but I have a day 2 and a night 2, that means the first time N2 would be the first time you saw an N. You wouldn't have an N1 in that case, but we'll come back to that. So I put script days D1. Again, it has to be, because it doesn't matter when it takes place. This could be a flashback, this could be a flash forward, doesn't matter. This is the first thing we are seeing because that is D1. Anything else on this particular day, even a flashback to this same day later, would still be D1. Unit, things like this, you can either leave blank, or basically if you fill it in, you're kind of committing to fill it in. I usually leave, because this is usually referring to, is it the primary filming unit, or is it like second unit or third unit or anything like that? Usually it's going to be your primary shooting unit. Does anybody know exactly what a second unit is on a film set? I was curious.
Is it like a unit where the primary director isn't present? Like
absolutely,
like an establishing shot, or like still shot or something?
Yeah. So anything that doesn't generally require something, sometimes you'll have a second unit if like it would add days. Remember, days are the single biggest expense on a film set. I'll repeat that ad nauseum throughout the semester. And even more expensive than hiring extra crew members. So a lot of times, if you have a significant amount of material that's like these little interstitial things, kind of like what Sam was saying, like establishing shots, or a lot of it times it's like hands typing on a keyboard, or it could be anybody's hands, but you're pretending it's Joe Pesci's or whoever. I thought Joe Pesci, but okay. Yeah, those would be usually not with the primary actors, but sometimes it depends, or maybe it's with doubles. A lot of times you'll give that to a second unit person. Car driving shots are big ones for that. If you're outside the car and can't really tell, like those shots that like establish that we've just entered Chicago or whatever, that type stuff. Basically anything you think you could get away with the director not being there. The main director, but you'll have a whole kind of clone unit for that. You'll have a second unit director and a second unit director of photography, and then whichever crew members that make sense that unit particularly needs. It'll be a skeleton version, but it'll still have its own kind of like infrastructure. But usually we would just call the main unit either like the main unit or the primary unit or the first unit. Nobody really says first unit, weirdly enough. So I just usually say main unit. But the thing is, if you leave it blank except for anytime it's not the main unit, then you're fine. But if you do put main in here once, you want to be consistent. So if you say main unit, you're kind of committing to it. And because I'm teaching it, I'll put main. Dang it. Now, sequence in this case is something this could be used for. The nice thing about the software is a lot of these, in this for any of the softwares you use, there are a lot of fields that can be used for multiple purposes. I use sequence, and most people use sequence to designate if there's anything that's going to have a through line. Like maybe in your movie, it has a lot of flashbacks, and every time you see a flashback, it's in black and white. So I can make that a flashback or a dream sequence. Or if I want to be very clear that something is part of a montage, even if all the shots get separated and moved around the schedule, I might put like montage 1. So that way, even if the shots are on different days, we'll know they're all meant to go together. So you can basically use this to track things that are meant to be like continuous in an actual sequence. I mean, obviously the entire movie is continuous, right? So, you have to get a little more, conceptual there, but I use it for flashbacks, dream sequences. I basically like to indicate it in case there's anything creative that the director wants to add to signify that it's a certain sequence, and it has to capture on set, to do that. Like maybe your dream sequences, you put Vaseline on the lens to kind of blur the edges. And if you don't do that, if you don't have an indicator that you should be doing that, you might forget to do it, and whatever. But like, yeah, you could just, and I normally would leave this blank, but if there's anything, I can use this, effect sequence if I want to do that. It's pretty much a free-for-all, but it's used usually to indicate things that you will probably see, a certain type of scene that you'll see either repeat itself or it's linked to another thing. I think in the tutorial example for this software that you can find on YouTube, they use chase sequences. I don't really do that because it's kind of obvious, because you put because the thing you can do is, so one thing, actually, this brings up a good point. I thought about something now. So you may have an intercut scene, or you may have a couple of scenes that are intercut. This could be something where it's like you're in, if it's properly written, you might have a scene that's like, it's meant to be happening kind of simultaneously with another scene. So like maybe you show somebody at one location and then you cut to somebody at another location, but then you cut back to the previous scene in progress. It's still going on, right? But it's got its own scene number because it's technically a new scene because there's been a scene in between, right? Am I making sense what I'm saying? Like, maybe this happens a lot of time if you have phone conversations. Maybe you show part of a phone conversation from one person's house, cut to the other person's house, show their part of it for a certain amount of time, then go back to the first house again. Sometimes you see it that way. Other times they just don't bother writing that you go to the other location. They let the director figure that out. So also, by the way, when you are, I'm assuming at least some of y'all have phone conversations in your scripts that don't designate necessarily exactly how they should be filmed. I think that's probably a reasonable assumption. So you can make the decision. I like to get, you're going to be thinking of this less as a director and more of a production manager or producer at this point. What I do is like build in the worst case scenario. So if I was scheduling like a scene where we don't know which side of the conversation we're seeing, like two people talking on the phone, they're both protagonists, maybe, or they're both important characters and they both live in obviously in different locations, so they wouldn't be on the phone. What I would do is if that scene is 2 pages long, for example, and it only indicates one side of the conversation because screenwriters don't usually bother to compensate for the scheduling people. What I would do is literally just put it down twice. I would clone it for each location, and I'd basically shoot the entire conversation from both ends to give or at least schedule it that way. So that way, you can always change the schedule to make it less. It's kind of like the budget thing we talked about in the previous classes. You want to schedule for the worst case scenario, for the most amount of time it'll take. And, if I was directing a telephone conversation where I did think it was important to see at some point in the conversation both ends of the phone call visually, I wouldn't shoot chunks. Anybody who knows me knows I teach that you never shoot chunks of scenes. You shoot entire scenes. So what I would do if there was a 2-page conversation and I don't know when I want to be on Bob and when I want to be on Lisa, I would shoot the full 2 pages at Bob's location, and then I would repeat the process and shoot the full 2 pages at Lisa's. So basically I would almost I could cheat it by making a sub scene. If the listed scene in the script was a phone call and it just said from Bob's house, but he's talking to somebody important that you might want to see, and that scene 4, I might just kind of like shoehorn in an Apple 4 afterwards and set at Lisa's house, but literally clone all the other information, just so you're compensating for the fact that, yeah, you still have to go there. That's a location move. And it's still going to take however long it would take to do the other one, and if you do that might be a little granular right now. And if it is, it's fine. Like one of the things that benefits us doing this in class together is when you're entering this information, you can ask me questions. Mostly put that on your radar. If you have a phone conversation scene, that you get the clear indication you're meant to see both sides of the conversation at least at some point in it, then that should flag you that if you don't remember what I'm saying right now, to remember to ask me about it. So that's the really important thing. Even if you forget what I said to do, just remember to flag any phone conversations. If it's clear that you're, obviously if somebody's calling like the grocery store and asking if they have, whatever shampoo, you probably don't need to show the clerk at the grocery store, it'll be usually pretty apparent if you want to see the other person or not. And sometimes it's written in and sometimes it's not. Like, it's very much, that's a screenwriter's choice. And they usually make the wrong choice. Go figure. But what I was going to say, originally what led me to that thing was, if you do have scenes that are genuinely intercut, meaning like you're on scene 4, then you go to scene 5 is at another place, then you go to scene 6, and it's really, if you really thought about it, it's a continuation of scene 4. Like, there'd be no reason while you're filming it to break it up, even though they are technically different scenes because there's another scene between them. But if you were to take that middle scene out, whatever, like maybe somebody's talking and you cut away from the mid conversation and you come back to them for the next scene and they're in the same conversation. Like, if you just imagine scene 5 was taken and 4 and 6 were there, you wouldn't have to yell cut between 4 and 6. You would just let it go as one continuous thing. You're choosing to put the editorial in there in the script, or somebody did, the writer did. In that case, you can put under the scene number, you can put like 1,3. So if it's like clearly a continuation, and you'll know it is because it'll never be it'll always leapfrog at least one number. Like, obviously if it was 1 and 2, then it should just be one scene. But the fact that it's broken up into 2 scenes because something interrupts it. And again, if you have anything like that, you don't even have to remember this. I just want to put things on your radar to flag, anything that seems abnormal. And scenes that are intercut or scenes that are, phone conversations, those are things that you should flag as to, you may remember this, you don't need me at all. But if you don't, if you do, then just, there you go. So yeah, sequence can be used for whatever. And you could use this to designate this, continuous phone call, intercut phone call or something like that, Now, location, the way we use these terms here specifically, the term set specifically is what refers to the named, in the fiction of the movie, the name of the place, Bob's house. Location, you're not going to even have at this point. That is going to be where you actually film it, and it gets filled in as you get those locations locked. Now, the only time I put anything in there this early in the process is if you have I assume on a lower budget film that almost everything is on location, meaning I have to go find it in the wild. If for some reason you know that what you're doing is going to have to be on some sort of studio stage, you don't even have to know which one yet. I will just put in the word studio just to remind myself that this is going to be something that we have to go book at a studio. Like maybe, like, you know, I had a movie where I had to, which is almost all locations, my movie Earthling, but it has a couple of sequences on the ISS, on the International Space Station, which we made out of like cardboard boxes. But that was on a stage. So, you know, I would just put like, and I didn't, you know, you don't have to know where it is. I just indicate if you think it's going to be on a stage or a studio, interchangeable terms. Estimated time, this is good. You don't have to put this at all. Estimated time is for way later down in the process too, after the assistant director is kind of like powwow with the director. Because theoretically, when you're doing this part of it, there may not be a director. And if it's on a bigger budget film, there probably isn't. They haven't hired that person yet because it's not the director who usually originates those bigger budget films. So estimated time is once the gears are really moving and we have an idea of how long we can spend on each scene. We're not there yet. So estimated time, you just leave blank. That is for the assistant director much later in the process. And then comments, I don't know if there's one in studio binders like this, but comments is a good place to put any special notes that you didn't find a good place to put otherwise, and that might be relevant. Also a great place, if you don't want to slow yourself down while we're doing this in class together, put Ask Clay. That way you can kind of compile a bunch of those without slowing yourself down. That's a good place to put that. You know, I could just say, look, I could do something like, there should be a little lookout for live tigers on set, you know, something like that, you know, or I could just say Ask Clay. Let's do that. Clay about something. Then so you're recognizing now that a lot of pretty much every piece of information we've already put in here is either stuff that you've either already generated in your homework or you kind of knew was coming, right? Nothing silly surprising here so far, right? Anything that was new is stuff that we don't even use yet for the most part. Any questions about this stuff so far? Like what we've looked at. Remember, we only schedule by eighths of a page. Those are mission critical. We do not use estimated time because we cannot predict that yet. Because that's going to be very dependent on the style of the director. And even if you are the director, you probably are not at the point where you know your shooting style yet. Like, and by that I mean your shooting ratio. And do we talk about shooting ratio yet in this class? What a shooting ratio is? So shooting ratio is a ratio of the final length of the movie when it's completed versus how much footage it took to get there. Just to give you a range, and this is something that's definitely worth talking about because it's very relevant to what we're doing. A studio film will have a pretty high shooting ratio. It feels weird when you first get started to realize you shoot way more than you need, but it's for a very good reason, because you never know what you need until you need it. So that's what coverage is, right? The intention of coverage, proper coverage, is to make sure you have something, and knowing that you cannot predict at what point in the scene you'll need it. That's why whenever we shoot any shot in a scene, you just don't shoot a chunk. You shoot the entirety of the scene through every shot. People misdefine all the time what a master shot is. And anytime I ask film students, like, what define, because I can always tell where they get it wrong. I say, and by this one misdefining this one definition actually sets a terrible precedent for the way you film things. So I'll ask students a lot. I'll say, how do you define a master shot? And I'll say, oh, it's the one that kind of goes through the whole scene. And that's true. And sometimes they'll say also, oh, it's the one that gets everybody in it and it goes through the whole scene. Those are the two responses and some combination of that. Well, the first one is 100% true and exactly what we're looking for, which is the one that gets everyone in it. And even though the second one, which is the one that goes all the way through the scene, is true, it heavily implies that the other ones don't. And the thing about a master shot, it's not the fact that it goes all the way through the scene that makes it unique, because honestly, every shot should go all the way through the scene, unless it's like an insert shot of like a watch, you know, or something like that. Something that's very only could be used at a certain time. Like if it's a 3-person dialogue scene and one person just watches the other two talk, you would still get the reaction shot of the person who doesn't talk or only has one line of dialogue for the whole scene, because you don't know when you want to use that reaction. You need to have that freedom. So you're so a lot of time that's going to obviously influence the total amount of footage you have to make, you know, if I have 3 people in a scene and I know I want 4 shots because I want a mass, you know, I want some sort of wider shot to get them all in it together, and I want an individual close up for each of the actors. That means, and if everyone is the full length of the scene, then you know that's 4 times the length of the scene. So it's 4 to 1 right there. And that's only assuming you do 1 take. So the way you determine your shooting ratio is you have to first kind of know your style. You have to, you know, and it's going to take you several films to get there. Basically, you want to take an average amount of takes and essentially multiplied by your average amount of setups anytime you move the camera. And again, the big assumption is that, and it's a professional assumption because everyone does do this in the real world, that you're shooting every shot that can be shot all the way through, all the way through. And I literally mean, if you were to rehearse a scene without even a camera on, just have the actors run through the whole thing, if that scene takes 2 minutes for them to rehearse it, if you stopwatched it, then virtually every shot should be about 2, give or, you know, within a certain margin of error, within about 2 minutes. Except for like literally things that you could not use at other times, like insert shots, you know, like, you know, if you cut to a close-up of a watch face, you know, if it's cut to a close-up of like me doing, you know, if I do this and you want to show like my wrist with a watch on it, well, obviously that's very spatially dependent on, or temporally dependent on when I do that. You can't just cut to that any point you want. I have to be in this physical position from a wider shot before it makes sense to cut to that. You know, if I was just didn't have my arm up and you suddenly cut to a close-up of my arm up with a watch on, it makes no sense. So that's the only exception to those rules are like basically insert shots. Yeah. And it's not the biggest thing in the world to have to like completely nail right now, but just know that it's a feature, not a bug, that we're going to have exceptionally more footage shot than we use, because that's not wasteful. That's actually being safe, conservative, and in a weird way. And like, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of the production class stuff. It actually saves you time because you need fewer shots overall. Anyway, so what you would do is you'd figure out, you know, at a certain point, you'd kind of have to kind of give a determination roughly of how many setups you have, and you have an average amount of takes you tend to see yourself getting. Like I average 3 takes, and my shots are usually going to be one greater than, my average amount of shots are going to be one greater than the participants in the scene. If it's a 2-person dialogue scene, my setup would be an average of 3. I mean, it doesn't mean that every time it's going to be just 3 shots. This means that's the average. You know, some will be fewer, some will be more. So, you know, in most of my movies are a lot of 2-person dialogue scenes. So basically, I averaged 3 takes and about 3 to 4 shots. So I'm anywhere, I'm basically between a 9 to a 12 to 1 shooting ratio. Means I shoot 9 to 12 times the amount of total footage I'll use. So I average it down to 10. So I'm at a 10 to 1, meaning that if my finished movie is 90 minutes long, I have somewhere around 900 minutes that was culled from. And that's not a lot. That's actually a little. An average studio film can be anywhere between 20 to 30 to 1. A Stanley Kubrick film is almost 100 to 1. And that's actually underestimating. Documentaries have the highest because they just have the most amount of, they don't know when things are going to happen. They film everything. So their shooting ratios are crazy. Average documentary shooting ratio for a low budget documentary is 40-1. When I worked at PBS, we scheduled for 40-1. And that was being very conservative and very miserly with the footage, because we were shooting still film back then, and the film was expensive just to shoot it. It's different now. So the reason I bring this up is that shooting rate, you can't even get even a remote estimated time without having an idea of what your shooting ratio might be. And you kind of can look at it on a scene to scene basis. You'll know when the director's there if they want a scene to be basically a single Birdman style shot, which will reduce the setups, obviously, but it also means the fewer shots you have, that means every shot has to be that more perfect because you have less to intercut with to fix mistakes. You can end up in a situation where if you have a scene that says genuinely a one take Charlie, like it has or one shot Charlie, this has one shot in it, well, that means that shot has to be pristine. So you're going to have more takes of that than you would of that requires more takes because there's nothing to cut to cover a mistake. You should never have that, by the way. Even if you want a scene to be a one shot, like True Detective style one, give yourself something to cut to because you never know what's going to affect that scene later, which may have to change because you have to remember that movies do not exist in a vacuum, or scenes do not exist in a vacuum. Your scene could be perfect. Your one take perfectly Birdman style thing might be the best camera work ever, the best performances the actors ever gave. It's like completely beautiful, on track, and you still may have to make an edit to it that you didn't anticipate because maybe it contains information referring to a previous scene, and maybe that previous scene ends up getting cut out and now that information makes no sense, something like that. Samantha, yeah.
Hey, so and like I feel like I understand what the shooting ratio is, but in terms of the shooting the entire scene, like front to back, the only way that I could like apply that at this exact stage is in the script pages, right? Like that's the only way. Script pages.
You don't need to do that.
Like later,
you don't need to actually try to incorporate that. So sorry, what I want to make sure, well, I need to introduce you to that because I want to separate estimated time from pages. So pages are the way you've been doing them. That you don't want to try to compensate for that. What estimated time does is then takes those pages and factors it with the particulars of either the scene or the average, depending on the type of scene it is. Like if you have the ability, sometimes it depends on this. Honestly, depends on how early you get a shot list from your director. Sometimes directors are not good about delivering them until you're on set. So you have to use averages. That's when you would use a shooting ratio. But if you literally get a shot list, you'll know exactly how many setups are on that shot list. Because anytime you have a new shot on a shot list, that's a new setup. So you would just take that amount of setups and multiply it by, however many takes is their average. That you'll have to average. And again, the fewer shots you have to assume more takes of, because they have to be there. There's more onus on them to be perfect. The more shots you have, you don't need every shot to be perfect. You can have mistakes in shots. Now, and then you have to look at the total length of the scene and be like, you just have to get this is kind of like beyond where we're kind of thinking. This is where you have to have an instinct for it to some degree that you would develop if you're an assistant director, just because you've typically been around. You may not have this on day one if you are working with a director for the first time, but a good AD by day 2 or by day 3, they'll know exactly how that director ticks, and they will basically try to keep them honest with the estimated time. Because basically what you have to do is, you're at a certain point, like right now we're scheduling the days, what scenes go on what day and how many can we reasonably fit on a day. That's where we stop at this phase, because we can't go more granular until there's a set director who knows what their deal is. Eventually, the thing that doesn't affect what we're doing, but specifically affects the assistant director and their on-set duties, they're going to take the shot list, and they're basically going to look at all the scenes you have on a particular day. if you have any other time eaters like company moves where you have to go from one location to another, which hopefully you won't have very few of, if any, because those are complete time destroyers. And then they'll be like, okay, so this, I have 4 shots and I have 3 scenes today. We have 12 hours. We average a 12-hour day. And in that 12-hour day, you have, you actually have 11 hours because you lose an hour for lunch. So I have 11 hours. I have 3 scenes. I have a director who averages 3 takes a shot. And, just to be easy, all 3 scenes have 5 shots. So I would take, the 5 times. So I have 15 units, I guess, 5 shots, 3 scenes, and then times 3 for the amount of takes. And basically have to use that and divide it by the total amount of time I have to figure out how much I can afford to give every shot time wise. And then I can take that as a base and like look at things more realistically and be like, okay, well, I know all these are all equaled out, but not all scenes are created equally. We know that like dialogue scenes without a lot of moving around, you can shoot a lot more pages of that in the same amount of time that you could shoot fewer pages of like people moving around and doing stuff, or what we would call action. But when I say action, I don't necessarily mean like running around with guns. I just mean like people changing blocking. Anytime you have people moving around a space, that just intrinsically adds more setups because it becomes more difficult to get things from the fewer shots you had to begin with. So I always assume that like, scenes that are dialogue heavy with only a few participants, I can kind of cram a day with those, more so than I could with like a short, action sequence. Like if I have something that's even more, there might be days where I only shoot 1 page if that page is particularly complicated. But there's also days I might shoot 8 pages of a dialogue because it's just 2 people sitting there yapping at each other, So you have to kind of just get an instinct for that stuff. That's one of the reasons why we don't kind of mess with this yet. But the good news is, yeah, you don't need to know anything more at this point other than I want to introduce you to this concept. You only need to know the stuff you already know about your 1/8 of a page, because we don't know. We can't remember. We're making what we call the perfect world schedule to start with, because we don't have a lot of real life factors in yet. This thing is going to be a growth document. This and the budget are going to change throughout, even in the making of the film. That's why you want to have your worst. That's why you always plan for the worst case scenario, right? Because you're always going to be flexing. You just don't want to flex past the worst possible version. That's why we put the ceiling of the budget at the highest point we'd ever have to raise, because it's going to change. There are other factors that come in, like things, when we first do the scheduling, which we're going to see here in a few minutes, I hope, the hierarchy of the order which we schedule things does not factor in. It factors in a perfect world system where it's like, if I had my druthers, I would schedule with a certain priority of elements. And in those priority elements would not be location or actor availability. The problem is the reality sets in. Actors have very weird schedules, and sometimes you can't get them at the times that are best for your schedule. Or a location, maybe you have a very special location like an ER in a hospital, and they'll only give it to you on a particular day when it's not really convenient for the schedule, but you have to make it work. That's what makes something not a perfect world schedule. So anytime I use that term perfect world budget or schedule, it assumes that of things that could go any which way the wind blows, I have my best option there. That's different than planning for the worst case scenario, but you'll see this more as we get in there. So don't worry about it too much now. Right now, again, I just want to like prepare you for these things that are coming down the pipe. But really right now, it's like, the scene number, the things that here, the little Hulk speak kind of synopsis, Bob watches late night cable, whatever. Script pages, script day, that's a big one. Unit, again, if you don't, it's okay to not leave it blank if it's the main unit, but if you do put main unit, just like you're going to screw yourself if you don't be consistent. Basically, you're committing to always putting that. I can't remember if it works this way in Studio Binder, but the nice thing here is once you enter something in one of these fields, it becomes a pull down menu or an what do they call it, predictive type thing. Sequence can be used for a variety of stuff. I tend anything that would make it stand out from the norm, but usually implies there's other things like that thing. So maybe you have 3 dream sequences, and I notate those again because maybe the director wants to, they might end up doing something on set to differentiate the dream sequences from the reality sequences. And maybe it's something that if they don't do it on set, it's harder to do in post-production. Maybe everyone wears clown masks in that. No, that would be on the props. Maybe it's black and white, like I said before, or there's Vaseline on the lens or something, whatever it is. Location, again, is the actual place in reality land you're filming, or the word studio if it has to be on a studio. If your scene takes place in the deep recesses of space, you're not shooting that at your brother's apartment, probably, hopefully not. Anyway. And then a comments is just a really good place to put anything either that you don't have another better place to indicate, but definitely feels like it should be noted. Or if you don't want to slow yourself down and you want to kind of collate, because you can sort by the comments too later on. So if you want to just not stop yourself, you want to get on a roll and not have to pause every time you have a question, you can just put a note like this on there just to remind yourself to save them to the end, just get through it, and then kind of like ask me all at once.
Hey, Clay.
Yeah.
For what you just said, for typing in the comments, does consistency matter? Like if we want to put that, do we need to type ask Clay about something exactly like that?
No, as long as it probably doesn't hurt to be consistent, but that's not like mission critical. You can put really anything you want in there, but yeah, if you're going to do a word search on your screen, like to find that stuff or sort it in an alpha, if you're going to sort it by the comments, it'll put it in alphabetical order in that way. Like, yeah, it probably doesn't hurt to be that way, but like, you'll be fine. Because the comments you don't always put something in comments. It would be hard. It would be like needle in a haystack at that point if you're trying to find the things that actually matter. Use comments relatively sparingly, but use them anytime you need them, but just like, you don't need them that often. So there should be a lot of like white space around the individual comments you'll see later on. Because when we get into the schedule, this entire page is going to be broken down into one thin line. Looks very similar to this line right here, but with information on it. You'll see it in a second. And then the last big thing is you take all the things you color coded and you basically enter them here based on their category. So in this scene, scene 1's not going to have much in it, if anything, because it's an establishing shot, and an establishing shot by its nature doesn't have anybody in it. If it had somebody in it, it would be a scene with that person. In this case, maybe I have Bob's car parked outside. So maybe I will go to my vehicles. I think there's a vehicles section here, isn't there usually? Yeah, there it is. So I click on this. And then this time I can enter either, if I've entered it once, it'll always be there as a pull down menu for any other scene. But here, since I haven't done, I'll say Bob's shitty Subaru. Oh, and I feel bad for shitting on Subarus. I like Subarus. I come from a Subaru family. Now, here's a weird thing. This will be for any software you use. Everything you put in here, no big deal. The way you enter it, there are 2 categories that get numbered items. Cast get a number, and vehicles get a number. The good news is vehicles get the number you give them is pretty much agnostic. Just give them the next number. So since this is the first one I enter, I can just make this the first one. But what I'll do here is, it's like, do you want to create this element? It doesn't exist. I say yes. Later on, I want to go back here and go and basically add the number to it. Now, cast members are highly different. And I'm about to tell you something that you might have thought that Hollywood is petty, but I'm going to give you the ultimate version of Hollywood pettiness. So cast members, when you get to call sheet, cast members are called by their cast member number, not by their name or their character name. They're assigned a number. The positioning of the number is something that contracts stipulate and are fought over vehemently, even though they'll only ever be known by people on set. Your leads generally get the very early numbers. Like, if you're doing Die Hard, then Bruce Willis would be number 1 on the call sheets, and, there's kind of an easy way of figuring it out. There's a couple of cheats to making it work. You can literally sort your cast members initially by the amount of scenes they're in, usually pretty good indication of their importance based on how many scenes they're in. And then you can just tell it to auto number it from the greatest amount of scenes to the fewest amount of scenes. Because it doesn't matter once you get in the weeds of like the day players, like, the clerk versus the auto repair guy, if one of them is 46 on the call sheet and the other one's 47, they're not going to get into a fight about it. It's really about those first positions, where it's like, who's number 1 on the call sheet, who's number 2. It is freaking ridiculous that these are literally negotiated points with the Screen Actors Guild, because no one but the freaking people on set are ever going to know this. It's just like, I don't understand. Like, people will give up points over like giving their number positions up. It's stupid as fuck, but whatever. I mean, it makes sense to some degree. It's like, I don't want to have to remember. I'm not going to remember that, 47 off the top of my head is the clerk or the auto repair guy or the cable dude. But, if I see one, I should be able to assume it's probably, Bruce Willis or whoever the lead is, So I get it on a conceptual level, but but when you're talking about actors that are like on the same tier, like the co-stars, for example, maybe it's the best friend and the girlfriend or the boyfriend. You got these two characters, and they're both basically fulfilling the same amount of screen time. It's like, that's where the fights are going to happen. Who's 2 and who's 3. It's dumb. And like,
it's a union that that's the work of a union. It's just supposed to be a democratic thing.
You would think, but no, it's actually just negotiations from the agents. SAG will like let it happen, and like they'll back it up, whatever the agent or manager wants to do. But like, it's really like the agent or manager for the actor representing him in that position. And yeah, it's annoying. But so yeah, so I would like, what I could do here, like I'll have to remember how it's done in Studio Binder, but here I can do a thing where I there's a thing called Element Manager up here, for example, and I would go up here to where is it? Where you go? Element Manager. And it's like, I would go to vehicles, and there's one, and I would go ahead and give it a board ID. That's the term for the number. And I'd go here and then be like, board ID 1. Boom. And now when I close this, there it is, 1. Bob Shitty Subaru. All right. So then, like, if there's nothing else in the scene of any consequence, I'm done. This huge gulf right here, this is such a wasteful thing about movie magic. This is for like really dumb shit, like putting photos or I guess maps or top downs. I guess it's not useless. We don't ever use this. This is for like other departments mostly. So all this real estate is something you're never even going to use, or at least not at this level. But yeah, in all these categories, it should look pretty familiar, right? And if you haven't seen them before, it's because I didn't note them because they weren't important enough, or they're so very obvious. Like, maybe you have Madonna doing a cameo, I guess. Maybe you want security on that day because Madonna doesn't want to look anybody in the eye. And you gotta have some thugs there wearing Wilson's leather jackets, telling people not to look Madonna in the eye. You might want to put security there. It's whatever. We're not going to worry about that shit. So then when I'm done with this one, I would just literally use this arrow to advance to the next one, and I repeat the process for the next scene. So what I'm going to do now is close this example and bring up a real filled out one that we had from a previous class and show you how these pages become the schedule. So at this point, I would go bye-bye with that, go away, and I'd go open schedule. Do I want to save it? No, I don't want to save it. Stupid. Yes, stupid. Let's see. Who had the best one from the previous class? Which one's actually properly done? here. Trying to pick one of the ones I think had some of it done right. Let's take a stab in the dark here. I'm gonna take this hard 8 schedule somebody did. All right, so now 120 sheets. Sometimes it'll give you an extra sheet at the end as a blankie, but here we go. So it's like just kind of scanning through here. Normally the scene and the sheet number match up, but it completely does not matter if it doesn't, because it usually falls out of sync somewhere in the process because you have like an insert scene or something. But basically what's going to happen is, again, these are just like, you'll see here, there's a synopsis, John meets Sydney. That's perfectly good. That's where it is. It's the main unit. This is linked to another scene, because I guess the other scene's a flashback to this, I think that's supposed to say shoots scene 28 in a row, meaning that like it's supposed to be continuous with 28. We just only see the rest of the scene later on in the movie, but you shoot it at the same time because it's really just a continuation of this one. Now, another way you could have done this is write 1,28, because they are meant to be really one scene that's interrupted by a pretty significant gulf of time. Now, notice we've got actors on the call sheet here, and it makes sense. They usually start a movie with the main characters. So it's not unusual to see the number 1 on the call sheet in scene 1. Not always going to happen. I'm just saying it's not unusual. Makeup and hair, it's like, I think this is pretty well done. And if I do a cursory scan through these, you'll start to see as, waitress is number 10. It's like, it starts to make sense after a while, the kind of system. And remember, the only things that ever need numbers are vehicles for some ungodly reason that has to do with the Teamsters and cast. And vehicles, Herbie the Love Bug's not going to fight for its position. So you don't have to worry about that. You do want to designate something more than just like, you want to get as specific as you can with a vehicle, especially if you have more than one vehicle. So like if there's anything that like qualifies it, like Sydney's Buick is good. I mean, you could put just Buick, but the problem there is, we don't know what car the director might pick a different car. So maybe they decided to use a Buick for somebody else's car in this scene, in the movie. At least if you put the attribution of who owns it, then we know, okay, well, what if the model of car changes? We still, this is meant to be Sydney's car, Again, you see this is only 2/8 of a page. It's day. We're still on D1 here, which makes sense because we're early in the script. Basically, except for when you go back to existing scenes, as you go chronologically through the shots in order, the way they are listed on this breakdown here, your script days should only ever be increasing. They should only go retroactive backwards, is if you get to a scene later on that takes place on a day you've already established, that you've passed already, If it is, even if it's meant to be a flashback, maybe at scene 31 of your movie, maybe on scene 30, you're on day 7. So the next scene will be day 8. Let's say the next daytime scene is day 8. But that next daytime scene is a flashback that happens 10 years before the movie started. It's still day 8. It doesn't matter how much, doesn't matter what direction time moves or how much time has elapsed. It matters the order on the chronology of the script. It's a new day and it's a different day. It's a same thing. It's a different day than we've seen, and it's next. So it just gets the next number. And I can help anyone with that on the day if y'all need help with that. Anyway, so if I just kept going through this, you would just see more and more examples of kind of like what happens here. But this is what we're trying to get to with your homework. And once all of this is done, then we get to what I think is the fun part, the Tetris game. If you like Tetris, you'll like this. It's about arranging things to make the most optimal shoot that costs the least amount of money, but still gets the job done right. And the way we do that is we take these individual pages that represent, each one scene per page, or again, several scenes that are meant, even though they're broken down, are really, really one scene that are interrupted, you know. Now you want to look at this in a different way. You don't want to look at the scene information sheet mode. Now you want to look at it as a schedule with a bunch of collated information. So what I would do in this software, and it's something very similar. So everything uses something called the strip board. And the strip board is literally like, I mean, it's named after what it was in the olden days when you did it on paper, which is crazy. It's crazy to think that when I took production management in college, we did it on paper. We did Movie Magic. It was like one of the first years we had Movie Magic, but we still had to do it on paper, and it sucked. Like what you're doing on paper is not anywhere near what I had to do on paper. Uphill both ways in the snow. Yeah, so what I could do here is go to, where is it? I want to go to, no, where are you? Here we go. Strip board. So I go here and kapow. This is a strip board. This is very customizable. Let me be clear about that too. So what it does is that you can choose, there's always going to be certain information you want, but you can customize every line of this. Every horizontal line represents one of your scenes. You notice they're not currently in order. They'll start in order. You're going to change it. This has already been done. But here, let me make a copy of this one. So I don't want to mess this up, but I want to show you, I want to reset this so I can show you how I actually do this. Somebody give me a second here. What's the easiest way of doing this? Do a save as, I guess. Yeah, save as. Hard date. Let's do hard date reset or reset. There we go. Okay, so now I can undo all the choices I made and then start over from scratch. Also, I didn't do this one, so I don't even know how well it's done. Actually, this person did a great job. So what I can do, I'm just gonna just do this without telling you what I'm doing because there's no point. Because I'm just resetting things real fast. So I want to delete all day breaks. Yep. I want to gather. Nope, don't like that, do you? How do I nope, no, don't do that. Isn't there like a reorder? Reorder strips. Oh no, sorry. I'm trying to see if I can just do this really quickly. Give me a second here. Okay. Done. All right. So this is what it would look like when you first do it. So you've given it no parameters, no hierarchy by which you want to schedule yet. Nothing that takes precedence. Right now, it's just showing you the chronological progression. You see the scene numbers chronological. Is this showing up big enough? Can you read these on here, or is it too small on your screens?
It's kind of small.
Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. I wonder if I can just do this. It's not going to let me. Oh, come on. This thing is so ancient, the software. A lot of these stupid softwares we use, you can't like do the thing where you just like do the thing, you stretch it out. Well, I'm sorry. I try to make it like, can I do the, oh, maybe I can make the, but oh, maybe there's a way to make it bigger. I want to, there's usually a view column. Maybe. What is? Come on, there's like so many old fogies who work in the production department of films that you'd think they would have something that made it big for your. Oh, hang on a minute. I can make the font larger. Well, let's see what's going to, this might blow up. Let's go crazy. Oh, no, cancel, no. View. Oh, okay. No, god damn it. No, that wasn't what I thought it was. Strips. Oh, here we go. Okay, wait. I want to see. Can I make the thing bigger? Come on, man. Oh, screw you, dude. Sorry, 1 sec. It's pretty hard to read, huh?
I mean, if you're just going to tell us about it, it's all good. But I'm a little blind bat. I can't read it.
Yeah, just give me like 1 more second. I'll try to fix it 1 more time, just for a few more moments. I swear to God, I've done this before in here. I just can't remember where it is. Maybe it's under layout. Oh yeah. So what are we in? We usually use horizontal. Oh no, it's usually active custom. Let me try something. You don't need to know what I'm doing here. This is very specific to the interface I'm using, but I'm basically doing the. I want to do the layout. Where's the layout manager? No, strip. No, should be a. Maybe. All right, hang on a second. Almost there. Non-element. Oh, good Lord. No, that's not what I want. Sorry, guys. I think I can get this. Where's the strip board manager? Is that what it's called? It's not the element manager. There, right there, whole damn time. All right, so let's modify this. So we'll go into this here, and we'll go to where's I can step into it, right? There we go. All right. So no, the fudge, dude. Oh god damn it! No, it's the wrong one. Sorry, guys. Oh god damn it. Where are you? Oh yeah, here we go. Dummy. All right. So I go in here, and I go over here, and can we make this whole thing? Oh, you know what it is? Okay, sorry. I think I remember how to do this now. I don't think I'm in the right spot for it. No, I know it. Oh wait, hang on. Maybe boom, boom. Nope, that's not what I wanted. All right, I know what to do. I just remembered. Nope. It's been a while, but I remember. It says I have to change the board layout. Let's try horizontal A. Nope, that's smaller. So you can choose how you want to see the material. There's one of them that's like for blind people, I think. It's definitely not going to be thin horizontal. That's even way worse. Verticals are the worst. Vertical. Now this represents how it used to happen on set. That's what it used to look like. It used to be vertical, but fucking hell, man. There should be a. All right, I'm gonna try to talk you through it. Okay, I'll do my best. I wish I could just zoom in. Can I just Apple Plus? Nope, it's not gonna let me zoom in. Why won't it let me zoom in? It's so annoying. So annoying. All right, well, shit. Maybe. Can y'all read that at all?
Yeah, like my face is just close to the screen.
Well, I'll do my best to kind of narrate it. So, okay, right now we've got scene numbers here in this particular layout. So this, and again, you can customize what information you're seeing from that script entry page. What you generally want to see is a scene number is usually a good first thing to show. And then like interior, exterior, the name of the place, how many pages, who's in it by their ID number. So you'll see it says cast ID and it has numbers. It doesn't say which character. Then I had them put comments on there. Oh, that's a great, I'm glad that I looked at that. It's a great thing for comments. So one thing that would be highly, highly effective for you, that'll help you out a lot later. So a lot of times we're trying to square peg and round hole our freaking schedules to make it work for what we have. You know, we're trying to like put things in the most optimal order. That means trying to get creative in certain places. So what that might entail is what could give you some more wiggle room is if you have any scenes, let's say you have a scene that's inside. This only works for interiors, really. Let's say you're in an interior in like somebody's bedroom where you can basically assume that there aren't going to be any giant bay windows, right? Like somebody's bedroom is not going to have like a floor to ceiling window, more than likely, unless it's like some weird mansion. Average person house in the movie. You know what the type of house is meant to be, even if you don't have the location yet, you know? You assume there's probably a window or two, not very big. Well, those are good scenes that I could theoretically say, you know, if it's a daytime scene, I could cover up that window or even from the outside and shoot it at, you know, daytime if it's a night scene. So shoot basically day for night, you know? You've heard those terms before, right? Like day for night or night for day. Is those terms you've ever heard before? Where it's like you're basically cheating what time of day it is because your schedule, either you don't have the equipment if it's an exterior to do it that way. We're not going to worry about exteriors though. In this case, I use day for night, night for day for scenes that you can kind of cheat, and you want to have that in your back pocket. That doesn't mean you're going to do it. It just means you have the option to do it when push comes to shove. So what basically anytime this student had a scene that could work day for night or night for day, they would do it. Now, this movie takes place in a casino. Casinos are pretty bereft of windows for probably obvious reasons. Because of that, it doesn't matter that it's kind of like time of day agnostic as far as the particulars of filming it, which is actually a really good flex point, because the time of day you're going to find out is very important to our scheduling hierarchy. So if you have any scenes as you're entering them that are clearly not meant to be in a place that would be very prohibitive to try to either like, because I can also shoot a daytime scene at night if there's not a lot of windows, you know, I can put some daylight balanced large lamps outside shooting through the window to look like daylight. I do it all the time. You know, if you're talking about big ass bay windows, it's cost prohibitive. But if you're talking about a bedroom with like 1 to 2 regular sized, like, you know, bedroom windows, then yeah, absolutely. You could shoot night for day, day for night. You know, it's kind of time agnostic unless you're literally looking out the window. Usually you're not looking out the window. And the thing is, you know, if it saves the schedule, it's okay to basically tell the director like, hey, so this is going to add a day to production unless you just do not aim the camera at the damn window, you know? And I don't think very many of them are going to fight with you on that. So looking for candidates, again, does not mean you're doing it, but a good thing to put in your comments is something that could be a candidate for day for night or night for day. In other words, you could cheat it if it was more time effective to get it on a day where, you know, if you're shooting all nights and you're going to wrap a location, the only scene remaining in this one location is like a short scene that's in that same room at day, but everything else is at night. It doesn't make sense to go back there for like a 2/8 of a page scene. And if you could easily shove it on that same night, then yeah, you would just put a light in the window to make it look like daytime and just knock it out. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Is that fall? Are you guys tracking? And when I give you the hierarchy here in a second, which I'm about to do, hopefully it'll make more sense. So right now, again, everything is just in chronological order. So we've got the scene number, we got the interior or exterior or I/E. You've got where it is. Now, this assumes at this point, obviously perfect world version of the schedule, this assumes that you're not cobbling together a location necessarily from different places, but it is good that they're broken down. You'll see why, why we treat each room as a separate location. We got the length of it here. We've got who's in it, and if there's a vehicle for some ungodly reason. The vehicle, it only becomes an issue if like a vehicle costs you money to have it around. Maybe you have a Lamborghini in your movie and it's on only 2 movie days. You want to probably put those movie days close to each other if possible, and you don't want to have the Lamborghini on every day, because maybe it costs you $1,000 a day to have it. Well, you wouldn't want to have it extra days than the days you need it. So that's why vehicles are there, and this, whatever. Then we got comments. Again, this is a good use of this comments thing. I didn't even think of it until I watched this. We've got some sequency stuff here. That's all about. We've got, Now this is something that they really went to town with a sequence thing. I think they went a little hog wild with sequences more than I would, but doesn't matter. Let's not even worry about that. Okay. So what I can, the nice thing about Movie Magic, and I'm assuming, I think Studio Binder does something very similar. I'll know by the time I'll remember by the time we get in there. You can kind of let the computer do some of the heavy lifting, because we're going to make some base assumptions for our perfect world schedule. We're going to know that there is a hierarchy of scheduling, things that take precedence when you're making decisions, what shoots when, right? So let me give you an indication of that. So the thing that you can do to actually utilize the hierarchy is you can do an initial attempt at an auto sorting. And up here, it's one of these things. I think is it this one right here? Sort, yeah. So I can tell it. So each scene is called a strip at this point. And I can give it a series in hierarchical order from most important to least important of the things that we should be scheduling by. So here's what we do. So again, at this point, we don't know, since we don't have locations or actors cast yet, right? We're going to, of course, tempt fate and assume that whatever location we land doesn't have any strange limitations on which day we can shoot there. And any actors we have don't have any strange limitations on their schedule, forcing weird decisions. So with that in mind, we need to shoot for the things that are unpredictable. First, what is unpredictable? Weather is a big one, especially in Texas. Weather changes will sometimes invalidate the ability to shoot a film if it's outside, more than likely, right? A daytime exterior is probably at the extreme end of the thing that could be affected by weather, because nighttime, even though it is affected by weather, even if you're outside, there you do possibly, depending on how much you need to see, because it's so dark out there, you might be able to cheat that somewhere, maybe. But you can't cheat a daytime exterior. You see everything. You see to the horizon, right? You see as far as the camera will let you see. So if it's raining and you can't have rain in a shot, then you can't shoot that. So you need to be able to go do something else so you don't waste the day, because regardless, if people show up, you're paying them. And you can't tell them the night before, hey, we're not shooting today because of the weather. They're still going to get paid. Because that's where the concept of a cover set comes up. I have to assume at least some of you guys have heard of the term cover set, kind of have a concept of what it might or might not be. Basically, a cover set is the opposite of a wild card. It's a good and trustworthy thing that you could always go to. So one of the first things we're going to be doing once we auto-populate, and the very next step that kind of ties to this first step is we schedule the most volatile things at the head of production, and we schedule the good and trustworthy things at the end. Because if you did anything other than that, you could theoretically, it's like maybe you've got a couple of scenes that you could shoot anytime, and it's only, so a perfect cover set. Let me go back. A cover set is a thing you could jump to at a moment's notice if the weather fucks you or something else screws you, right? And what makes a perfect candidate for a cover set is something that has, well, usually, okay, most movies, right? The lead actor or the lead few, but really when you get down to it, if you can narrow it down to the least amount of actors, the number one on the call strip, right? On the call sheet, most movies have lead actors that are in the vast majority of the scenes and probably are going to be around every single day of your production, meaning that you don't need to, like, if it's, they're not going to have like a day off, you have to wake them up if something bad happens, you know? So a perfect cover set would be a place that you had access to the entire film with actors who will always be around the entire film. So no day players, no scenes with like just the clerk or just the guy giving that person a ticket, you know, something where like the least amount of, but most prevalent characters. So ideally, like a really good one would be like, I'll give you an example from my own movie Slash. So we had a lot of scenes in Slash where it's just the main guy who's in like almost every single scene in the movie. And it's in his bedroom. And we wanted a place that we could control. And we wanted a place that we could control, meaning that we had access to no matter what. And it would be ready to go anytime. So my long-suffering producer, one of my producers that lives in town, not Brock, my other producer who's not a GP, he, much to his wife's chagrin, gave us his upstairs of his house to basically pre-dress as the main character's bedroom, since we had a metric shit ton of scenes in that room. And a lot of those scenes are just him on his computer doing stuff. And they're really easy stuff to shoot. And there are things that, you know, you might be tempted to want to film early because you could warm up on them really easily, but those are precious. Those are more precious than rubies, those scenes, those good cover set scenes. Because here's the deal. My art department, when we got into active pre-production, one of the first things they did is the art department came and dressed that room. And that room stood there like a museum piece from that entire month through all of production and even through pickup. So like another month or so afterwards was like a monument to that character. It was literally dressed as that character's bedroom. And at any point, since we always had that character and we had a lot of scenes with just him in his bedroom, it would be so easy if something bad happened and we couldn't shoot a scene for the day that we could just jump to that location. We always had something. So you don't want to burn those out. You don't want to waste those by getting them out of the way. So it makes sense that you would put them at the far end of the schedule, at the end, right? Because that way they're always available. And as you're burning, you know, you might have to dip into them occasionally, but like you're going to keep your perfect cover sets at the very, very end. Because again, like it'd be one thing if you, let's say you have no problems, you never have to use your cover sets, and you get towards the end of the schedule and now you have your cover sets and you shoot them at the end the way they were written. Well, that's fine. You're never going to be like rained out of a cover set, right? The whole concept is it's interior. It's kind of time of day agnostic because maybe the windows aren't very big. It has somebody who's always going to be there. And it's a place you could go to at the drop of a hat. So yeah, I mean, you might be like, well, that was a waste. You get to the end and then now you're shooting the easy stuff or whatever. But no, it was absolutely did exactly what it was supposed to do. Now think about it the other way. If you did the reverse, if you put your more volatile scenes later on and you've shot everything else that could be a go-to thing if a volatile day goes bad, you've got nothing to shoot when shit goes to pot, you know? So like if you shot all your potential cover sets because, you know, they were easy and it felt good to get them out of the way early on, and now you're towards the end of your schedule and all you have are like daytime exteriors and you got a week of rain comes in, you're fucked. Because you've got nothing you can go shoot. So you want to like, you know, you want to anchor your schedule for that. So does that make sense what I'm saying, by the way? I'm sure some of you guys already probably knew that too, but like in general, is that kind of feeling right? So yeah, so at very close to the top of the hierarchy, if not the very top, I would put interior or exterior because I want to get all my exteriors out. So what I would do is I'm going to add a hierarchical element that I want it to schedule by. And I'm going to add here, and I'm going to change it to IE, which is interior exterior. So I said I want that up there as one of the major things that I'm going to schedule by. Now, the other thing that's going to screw you is if you usually link to day or night, are those scenes that can't be night for day or day for night, the ones that have to be filmed at the accurate times. You can't, based on the fact that you can only shoot 12 hours, you wouldn't want to shoot more than 12 hours. It's very hard to jump. You're not going to want to put a day scene and a night scene on the same day, usually. There are exceptions, we'll get into that, but you do want to also sort by time of day as well. So I would add another element and say, you know, again, we're going to do time of day, DN for day night. It's going to be different in Studio Binder. I just want to just let you know the overall, the hierarchy of using interior, exterior, day and night. Those are great. There's two more things. Now, so one of the things you should always have in your mind when you can. Now, this is still takes precedence. Both these things are very important because they affect the greatest amount of people. Because everyone's affected if you can't shoot, if you go overtime because of a day or night mess up, or if you can't have a cover set so everybody gets paid to do nothing, right? But the next two things are just slightly lower in the hierarchy until they're not, of course. But at least initially, you've got like, there's two things you always want to try to be doing, or one thing you want to be doing for two categories. You always want to be trying to wrap cast members and locations. Get them out of the way and gone so you never have to look at them again. So that means obviously when we're talking about the lead actors, they're going to be around the whole time, but like day player, maybe you've got a supporting character that's got like an assorted 7 days out of 20 days of your film. With SAG and with pretty much any of the unions, but specifically with SAG, if you have them in town, and let's assume that the bigger people you're bringing in, they're not working as locals. You know, they're not living in Austin necessarily. If you bring them in, you're not going to want to send them home if they have a few days off. You just want to shoot all their days back to back, because any day that they're there, they're not working, they're still getting paid. So if I can make it work with these taking precedence, I want to also try to get actors all their scenes as close together as possible if they have limited scenes, right? If they're not there the whole time, and get them gone. You know, I want to get them out of it, done and out. So I could add here, cast. Does it not even give me an option for that? Oh yeah, this is the weird thing. It doesn't give you an option. Well, it's okay. I'm gonna keep this here for a second. So it won't let me do cast in Movie Magic scheduling for some reason, which I find ungodly stupid. But that is an element we do. You'll do that one manually. But actually, I think Studio Binder might be smarter than Movie Magic there. But the last one is the other thing you want to wrap when you can are locations. One of the cardinal sins of filmmaking is filming at a location where you had to like basically bring everything in from your gear wise and store it there, and all the places, all the departments had to find their little like cubbies where they could hang out and set up shop. Like it takes so long for everyone to get acclimated to a location that if you wrap a location, like if you leave that location and have to take all your stuff and go somewhere else, you don't want to go back if you can avoid it. And if you go back for no good reason, now sometimes you can't avoid it because of some scheduling conflict. Remember, the actor or location availability can take precedence. But at least from a default standpoint, you will have a mutiny on your hands if you force people to go redo the work they already did just because you scheduled poorly. In other words, if you can wrap an individual location, and this goes for, by the way, this is one of the reasons we do break, if you remember, we break down the house into different rooms, for example, is because this goes to even the scene level. You know, I don't want to light the living room, shoot one scene in the living room, then go to the hall, go to the bathroom, and then have to come back and relight the living room for a scene I could have gotten back to back. So we want to try to wrap not just full locations, but even rooms within locations we want to wrap. Honestly, we want to wrap angles. We can later, we don't have to worry about it now, but like when you're on set, the assistant director is trying to get you to, if I'm looking one screen direction, I want to shoot everything that direction. I don't want to turn around, relight for the other direction, then be like, whoops, I forgot a shot this way, and having to go back and relight the work I already did. So it's always about like working smart, when possible. Now, there's always going to be exceptions because obviously the first two, the interior, exterior, day and night, take precedence over locations, but they're still on there. So I would add to this locations because I want to try to put like with like. So a lot of this is putting like with like. If I can sort things by actors, if I can sort it by locations, that's wonderful. And literally, like, since I can't use actors for some stupid reason on here, I hit okay, and it'll take a stab at putting things in the order I said. And by the way, these colors correspond to the time of day, and I can change these. But what it's done is made a first attempt in its stupid computer brain to basically honor my request. It's like, all things being equal, I'm trying to put at the top of the schedule the exteriors, and I'm also trying to put the locations as close together. You notice there's like no-tell, motel, all these next to each other. The coffee shops are next to each other. So we've got exteriors, time of day, you can tell by the color clusters, and locations third, and then you got actors that for whatever reason won't let me do that. Those are the four major hierarchical things that we use to start with. And that'll knock out a bunch of the work. The nice thing is it gives you a really good starting point. So you're not just having to start from the ground zero. It gives you something you can look at. And then the next thing you do is figure out how many pages per day you want to average, and we'll stop there. Is this kind of making sense so far? We're obviously by the time you're actually working in it, it's gonna click if it hasn't yet. Okay, did I still? Yeah, I did. All right, I'm gonna stop recording.